All right, MFFLs, we got some news and rumors to dive into on your Dallas Mavericks in a second, but we wanted to ask you this question first. Do the Mavericks have the best front office in the NBA? Type Y for yes, type in for no. It'd be hard to say Boston with what they've been able to do with Brad
Agreed.
Stevens with that top six in terms of the player acquisition, but after that, especially after this offseason, pretty hard to argue with what Nico and company have been able to do.
Mavs are in the conversation for sure, and we're going to talk about a guy that if they were able to land, they may be that number one guy or that number one front office in the NBA. So let's get right into today's show.
He's Jeffrey Cooperstein. I'm Harrison Graham. Jerami Grant rumors are back on Dallas Mavericks Today. Not the first time, probably not the last. Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian says that Portland's goal is to move either Grant or Anfernee Simons before the beginning of the season, Coop. And I like both players,
I do
but
too.
you don't really need Anfernee Simons at this point. You got plenty of guards. We know that the Mavs have liked Jerami Grant for a long time. There's been mutual interest there in the past. Could maybe something come to fruition at some point. Before the season seems unlikely,
Agreed.
but maybe it's a trade deadline type of deal. Who knows? But obviously, with where Portland's at, it doesn't shock me that they'd be trying to move on from him.
No, I mean, the fit is certainly there for the Mavericks basketball-wise. I think he fits perfectly into what the Mavs need, a scoring four who can kind of dictate on the offensive end. He can create his own shot a little bit as well, and he's a good three-point shooter. So I think the actual basketball fit really works. We'll dive into the financials and what it would cost here in just a moment, but just looking at his raw stats, I mean, this is a guy that could certainly help the Mavs.
Yeah, and look, I think sometimes, and there could be some truth to it with Jerami Grant, that players are just good stats, bad team guys. But I will say this, especially the last 2 years, he's been pretty damn efficient, and he's done it without playing with the premier point guard, which is what he would have with Luka Doncic. So not only can he get his own bucket, but some of the catch-and-shoot looks he would get playing with the Mavericks. I mean, I think he'd fit in really well here. He hasn't defended at a high level the last couple of years, but he's been able to do that in the past, and we saw a guy like P.J. Washington come in here and ramp up his defense to another level.
Question.
Maybe playing for a contender would motivate Grant to do the same. Now, the asking price that's been reported has been 2 first-round picks, so a little rich.
Jovan Buha of The Athletic, who covers the Lakers really well, he said that the Lakers are interested in Grant, but they do not want to pay Portland's asking price of 2 firsts, and I don't blame them. I don't think anyone wants to pay that asking price for Grant. Especially at this time of year in the market that the NBA is. And then also, given his contract, where teams are trying to stay below that first apron to avoid all those restrictions, it's a difficult contract to take on, so you really have to be committed to it.
Yeah, I think that's where Portland's going to run into some resistance, and probably has, Coop, is Grant's a good player. If he had 2 years left on his deal, I think you could get 2 first-rounders. But the fact that he has 4 and in all likelihood would take on that player option, asking for 2 firsts to shelve out a 4-year deal of quick math, $140-ish million left.
Yeah, I believe it's 132 something.
It's asking a lot if you're the Blazers front office. So, we'll look at a trade in a second, but I think if you're Portland, you got to get more realistic and say, okay, let's take 1 first and some kind of player acquisition to move on from Grant, because not many guys that are all NBA level players do teams want to take on with 4 years left of over $30 million per year. That's just a massive contract for a good but not great player.
And the timeline doesn't also quite add up either for where the Mavs are at. I believe the Luka player option is the 26-27 year, whereas Grant's guaranteed for that year, and his player option's in the 27-28 season, which, I mean, God knows what this CBA looks like. I mean, you could have average players like Davis Bertans making $45 million a year at that point, but I would imagine Jerami Grant ends up taking up this player option. I mean, it's very far down the road to even consider that, but it doesn't quite fit the Mavs timeline.
Yeah, I mean, the Mavs right now have a bunch of guys on 2- and 3-year deals. So do you want your 3rd or 4th best player having the longest remaining on his contract? Now, Luka's going to re-up next year. We know that, but still, I think it's a fair question to ask. We'll explore this a little bit more here in just a second, but first, let's talk about our sponsor, Game Time. I know a lot of you guys are Cowboys fans, and the preseason is just around the corner. If you want to go check out a preseason game or a regular season game for the Dallas Cowboys, you can get your tickets with Game Time. And if you don't have an account set up yet, download the Game Time app. Use promo code CHATSPORTS to get $20 off your first purchase only. Terms apply there. You can also go check out the Rangers. They're in the middle of a tense battle in the AL West, 3-team race with the Rangers, Astros, and Seattle Mariners. So lots of high-leverage sporting events to go to, plus concerts, plenty of awesome what's the word I'm looking for? Musicians coming into Dallas in the next couple of months. You get flash deals, good sales, last-minute tickets for the lowest price guaranteed. The point is if you're going to an event, you got to get a ticket, and it's all online and digital these days. Do it with Game Time because they make it very, very easy, and they do guarantee that lowest price up to the point if you see a lower price on a different app in the same section, in the same row, you show Game Time that, they will lower the price for you. So go check it out. $20 off your first purchase only with code CHATSPORTS. Terms apply. All right, so let's explore this a little bit more, Coop, of Jerami Grant. And, yeah, like I kind of teased in the front end, they'd have to lower that price. And
2 first-round picks, the Mavs aren't budging there.
You could talk me into certain packages with just 1 first-round pick. The money's the tricky part, getting that up to that $30 million range to match that contract for any team, but also the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, the only way the math really works is you obviously have to add Maxi Kleber in there with his $11 million salary.
Which I'd be cool with.
I'd be cool with as well, but then it gets a little sticky. Then you're looking at the likes of P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, who you would have to move in order to make the money work. I was trying to mess around with it on Trade Machine to try to aggregate other salaries, and it really just doesn't add up. So this is kind of what a framework of a deal would have to look like. It would have to be Maxi Kleber, probably Daniel Gafford, because I don't think they would want to trade Washington over Gafford and a first-round pick involved in this deal.
Yeah, and I don't think, at least before the season, I'd go there. Now, could that change at the deadline depending how a Gafford, how a Washington are playing? Certainly it could. But I feel like the Mavs have been starving for good center play for a while, and now you have this awesome two-man rotation.
So why get rid of it?
I'm not trying to get rid of that right now. Like that two-man punch of Lively and Gafford was critical in this Mavs playoff run. I would not do that. As crazy as it sounds, I'd rather do Washington than Gafford, but I don't want to do that right now either because he played a big role on this team last year, and he's significantly cheaper than Jerami Grant just in terms of flexibility moving forward. So, yeah, I think this would be one, Coop, where let's see how things look at the trade deadline.
Yeah, for sure.
Injuries pile up. Maybe Gafford's not playing that as good as he did last year. Maybe you feel like Lively's taking a big enough jump where you could do this trade and then maybe go find a cheaper backup center or something like that in some separate trade, or maybe Portland sends somebody back. Who knows? But, yeah, I think right now, as we ask you guys this question, would you do this trade for Jerami Grant? I think I'd have to pass. And I like the player, but he makes a lot of money, and you're trading 2 rotation guys for 1, and especially Daniel Gafford, who I think is still going to have a major role on this team.
Agreed. I would pass on this trade as well. I like Jerami Grant. I don't love him, and I think I would have to love him in order to give up this kind of package for him. I know that you tend to overvalue your own role players and whatever, but I do believe that Gafford is such an important player for this team, and I'm really not willing to part with him right now. Unless they get desperate at the deadline, like you said.
And look, I am always one to say is don't fall in love with role players, but I think that's true when you're getting a bona fide all-star. Jerami Grant, at his best, is a fringe all-star. Yeah. He's a really good player. He's a good starter. That's kind of the category I put him in. Well, you have Gafford, who would start for a lot of teams, and Kleber, say what you want about him, a proven playoff rotation player. Yep. And a first, that's a lot to give up for not an all-star. So I think I would pass right now and, ask me again in February when you're halfway through the season and the trade deadline's around the corner.
Yep, let us know what you guys think down in the comments. And just a couple of news and notes before we head on out of here. The Mavs are going to be holding training camp, or at least part of their training camp, in Vegas. They're going to do Media Day on September 30th and then head out to the desert for a few days of training camp before preseason begins. So this is new. Obviously, the Mavs owners, the Adelson family, they own the Sands Corp. They live out in Vegas, and that's their home. So maybe this becomes a regular thing for the Mavs in the future.
Yeah, who knows? So that'll be fun. for these players to get out there and do all of that. Speaking of training camp, an NFL training camp, Nico Harrison, Jason Kidd out in Pittsburgh hanging out with Mike Tomlin and the boys at Latrobe, where they do their training camp just outside of Pittsburgh. Jason Kidd, he's a Steelers fan, isn't he?
That sounds right.
Or he's tight with Tomlin or something.
I know him and Tomlin have a good relationship.
This isn't some random visit.
Right. And he just kind of wanted to, get into the process of what Tomlin did. Kidd spoke about, he told the Pittsburgh Reporter that he wanted to, kind of know Tomlin's secret more or less about how he's been able to achieve this longevity as Steelers coach for, 17 years now. So I think Kidd's trying to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, you look across the NBA, it's hard to find coaches that sustain success for a long time.
No question.
Popovich did it for a while, Kerr,
Spoelstra.
Obviously Spoelstra. Jason Kidd is looking at this okay, I'm entering year 4. Year 1 was good. Year 2 was bad. Year 3 was awesome. Don't want to take a big step back. It doesn't mean they're going to be in the finals next year, but, Mike Tomlin is a guy who has sustained at least a playoff level of success for the most part for his entire career.
Never been under 500 one time in his career. So
very, very consistent. Something to be said for that.
Definitely something to be learned there.
So very cool there. He's Jeffrey Cooperstein. I'm Harrison Graham. We'll have more Mavericks news and notes as we go along throughout the offseason. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys soon.
See you.